My guest for the Living Room Tapes today is Mr. Fred Carl. Mr. Carl, the legislative process and introduction of bills, where does it all begin?
It begins in a person's mind, really. If they want to have a bill introduced, they can contact any legislator and talk to him about it. And if that is acceptable to that legislator, he can then take it to the legislative services. They will draw up the legal part for that bill, and it will then be introduced.
You make it sound like it's a casual, friendly process.
It really is. It may sound complicated in the way that it goes through the legislature. It's a people's government, and you have the right to suggest bills, different pieces of legislation that you feel are worthy for the people in the state of Montana. So it is simple, but the way it goes through may sound a bit complicated. It starts in the legislative services. Legislator takes the idea to the legislative services, and they actually develop the legal portion, put the legal words in, so that it can be introduced into the Senate or the House. He then delivers it, let's say, start with the Senate. He delivers it into the hands of the Senate, where it is introduced. It's called first reading, and at that point it is appointed or sent to a particular committee. If it is a bill on, let's say, agriculture, it will go in the agricultural committee. That committee chairman then has the prerogative of setting up the schedule for the hearings on that. So you introduce a bill or an idea to a legislator, he gets it in, and it is now in a committee with the committee chairman arranging when that bill will be heard by the public. The hearing is in front of the committee, and the public has a right, and I would think an obligation, to be there, discuss the pros and cons of that particular piece of legislation, for or against, and do their best to convince the members of the committee one way or the other if they are for or against that bill. So if you were the one that presented it to the legislator, certainly you would want to be there and give your reasons for that particular bill. Once the committee has heard the public, they then meet and make a vote or make amendments to the bill. And if it is passed by the committee, it then goes down to the floor of the Senate for the Senate as a whole to discuss it and argue it, if you want to say argue, make amendments, whatever it is that they feel would make that bill better for the public and for Montana.
You use that word, argue. It doesn't mean the same thing when you're arguing with your little brother.
Absolutely not. It is... It is different because you feel very strongly about a position, somebody else feels strongly about the position on the other side. The argument should be friendly. Sure, they get heated, but it was never taken personally. You could argue with a person, and yet you could walk out of that meeting with your arms around each other. As I say, one of the problems in discussing politics or religion and so on, it becomes emotional. It can be emotional, but it isn't taken personally when it is over there in the legislature, which is the way it should be, in my opinion. So you can discuss the object, the Senate, the House, wherever the bill is being discussed, and do it in an exciting and favorable way that people will understand and know that you're compassionate about it.
The nature of argument, it's not combat.
No, it isn't combat. You're on the floor of the Senate or you're in the House after the bill had passed the committee. It's down on the floor, and all of the senators, or if it's in the House, all of the House members, have a chance to add to or take away from the bill. An argument can be a heated discussion, but what everyone is trying to do when they present a segment, their particular position on that bill, is to make it better for the state of Montana and the people of Montana. It's really interesting. You can walk out of a meeting with a fellow that you had a tremendous discussion or argument with and have your arms around each other. In the politics and religion, people have the tendency to say you shouldn't talk politics or religion. The reason is that it becomes emotional. And when emotions are not held in, you never get a honest and free discussion. You have to consider the emotional aspect of everything that we talk about in the Senate or the House. It is discussed and it is emotional, but it is never taken personally, and that's the nice thing about it.
Mr. Carl, of your impressions of people who succeed or fail in the legislature, is it the loudest, most brusque, aggressive people who succeed and get their ideas across, or is it sort of an everybody thing?
No, it really is an everybody thing. It comes down to who can express in the most intelligent way reasons for or against a piece of legislation. There are some that yell and scream and everything else, and you see people in public yell and scream, and how much do you pay attention to them? If they present themselves in a decent way with logic, then they are listened to. Ones that just shoot off their mouth all the time and are always talking. We had several when I was there that whenever they got up to speak, it was really a shame. All the senators would pick up a newspaper or something else and start reading and never listen to them.
But those people are not a majority, are they?
Thank goodness they're not a majority. No. Most of them have the ability to present an argument for or against a piece of legislation. And it may sound complicated to get it through, but it really isn't. Once it is discussed on the floor of the Senate or the House, it then goes, if it passes that, they take a vote, then it goes to third reading, and third reading is simply the official yes or no on that piece of legislation, at which time it then goes to the other body. So if it's in the Senate, it then goes to the House, goes through the same process, introduced into a committee meeting, hearings on it at the committee meeting, onto second reading in the House, discussion by all of the House members, and then a reading for the third reading, which is the final reading. Once that is accomplished and it is passed by the House, has already been passed by the Senate, it then goes to the governor for his signature. The bill is passed and signed by the governor, then it is the law of the land for here in Montana. Education Committee, the Social Services Committee, and the prisons, those three take 91% of the total budget of Montana. Where are we going to cut?
So you've got a bill that's through the Montana Legislature. How does a citizen find out what the thing actually says?
Well, there are several ways to do that. Number one, get a copy printed from this courthouse or from the Capitol, or from an attorney that they may know that's a friend. They can most likely be able to Google it on the internet. They can find out. There are so many ways nowadays with the communication setup that we have that a person can easily find out what it says, and like it or not, it is then in the law.
Mr. Carl, the stereotype is that of the wealthy legislator getting big bucks for his position in government over a period of many years.
That is a fallacy, although it might be true for the congressmen and senators in Washington, D.C. It certainly is not here in Montana. When I was there years ago, we got all of $20 a day and $20 per diem. And, of course, we still had our home expenses to go. So it is not what you'd call a money-making proposition. And a person that feels strongly about Montana isn't there for the purpose of making money. She's there for the purpose of trying to make Montana a better place for us and for our children and grandchildren. We have a lot to offer in Montana. If you have children or grandchildren, don't think of politics as something evil. It has gotten to the where many people do think of it as evil. People say, I'm not interested in politics. They should remember politics is interested in them and affects them in many ways. Democracy is freedom that we have to pick our leaders to lead us in the right direction. It is something that all of us should really consider, and consider seriously if we get young people involved so that they know where it's going. I believe, and I've stated it on many times, and I have it on my brochures, that if we have the right to complain about something, we have an obligation to do something about it. I think that everyone should get involved. I think you, as an individual, if you are looking at this television, think about becoming involved. You have the ability. You have the ability to think. You have the ability to converse. You have the ability to present an argument or present in a discussion your feelings. Do it, because you want what's best for the state, what's best for the people, what's best for your children and grandchildren. Get involved and be a part of the system, and let's make it work, and make it work for all of us. That's the only way that it will ever be done, is when people get involved and want to be a part of the system and want to contribute. We need two parties, and we have to have the people like you involved to help solve our problems.